You there! Do you like art? Do you like watching YouTube videos? Better yet, have you ever seen a YouTuber with pretty art in their video thumbnail and thought to yourself, that looks cool? How do I do that thing? Well, search no further because you just found your answer. I'm MaximumPanic, Manic for short, a small-time YouTuber and artist who's been churning out doodles and scribbles and fan art oh my since before I knew how to say the word cheeseburger. And I just so happen to be one of those people who makes the pretty art you see in these YouTube thumbnails. Which I'm sure begs the question, Manic, at what point in the last year did you become an expert on making YouTube thumbnails? Well, you see, I may or may not have achieved some sweet side gigs working for none other than, wait for it, some members of the Vanoss crew. That's right, I've taken up a part-time job making thumbnails for the ever-so-humble Mr. I Am Wildcat, aka Hamboss, and as of March 2022, your favorite panic party-goer is officially the full-time thumbnail artist for the one and only H2O Delirious. Some people have been wondering for a while now how I make the thumbnails for my own videos, and on top of that, how I make them look so damn good. So I figured I'd share a video to give you guys some tips and tricks for making your own YouTube thumbnails. In this video, we're gonna cover 4 different topics: my personal experience making YouTube thumbnails and the art process behind it, advice on creating YouTube thumbnails for other people, also based on personal experience, examples of the kinds of YouTubers you might end up working with if you decide to make thumbnails full-time, and of course, redrawing some old thumbnails that really need some TLC. Now, take what you're about to hear with a grain of salt, because what I'm laying out in this video is based on my own experience and isn't meant to reflect on thumbnail artists as a whole. This video is just my own perspective, as opposed to the hundreds of other talented artists on the platform who've been in the game a lot longer than I have. So, with that in mind, let's start off this video with some of my personal advice, or advice that helps me learn how to make thumbnails overall. Let's get right down to it. MaximumPanic thumbnail tip number 1. If you're drawing thumbnails for your own YouTube channel like I do, take the pressure off yourself and just have fun with it. Just experiment with different styles and see what suits your fancy. When you're making thumbnails for your own YouTube channel, you are your own boss. You set your own deadlines, and you have all the time in the world to experiment with whatever style you think is best for your own channel. Me personally, I do all different kinds of styles because it's fun and it's a good way to test what I can do as a person, you know? Or at least what I can improve on and, well, what exactly I want to do with my thumbnails, you know? But yeah, for some of these different thumbnails, I do different styles. For my variety games like Phasmophobia, Minecraft, or Left 4 Dead, I usually do a wackier, more fun art style. Something with a lot of effects, bobblehead proportions, vibrant colors, big eyes, something to really pull your eye into the subject matter, you know? A more colorful aesthetic that tells you the second you click on this video, we're gonna have a pretty chaotic fun time here. And then there's the thing that I do for my Let's Play series, where normally what I do is I draw myself in the position of the main character, just to show the audience that I'm really struggling to get through this game, or that I'm immersing myself in the gameplay, you know? For example, in this thumbnail that I'm drawing right here, you can see me fighting back against the God of Thunder himself, because for most people's God of War Ragnarok playthroughs, the Kratos vs. Thor SmackDown was the most iconic fight from the first episode of that series. Plus, I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to draw themselves fighting a god in what is essentially a my dad can beat up your dad kind of fight, right? I mean, I'm not half-heartedly, like, you know, playing these games just for the sake of views and ad revenue because, I mean, let's face it, what ad revenue? But yeah, I mean, that's just my take on what I do for my own thumbnails, so take with that what you will. Thumbnail tip number 2. Consistency goes a long way. Not only are you helping your audience remember that this is your distinctive style, but you're building a brand for yourself. Something to say, hey, you see the way these thumbnails are drawn? You see all those shiny colors in there? You see how those guys all have the white eyes and the mouths to take up half their faces with the shrunken pupils? I did that thing! Well, for example, have you ever noticed how some YouTubers' videos have certain details in their YouTube thumbnails that you see every time a new video goes live? That's because the style, colors, or format follow a similar pattern or stay consistent to help the viewer realize, oh, this must be so-and-so's video. There's a lot of ways to make your thumbnail distinctive. People might recognize your style because either they all use the same colors, maybe the same character is featured throughout each thumbnail, or the same border is used to frame them all like they're a set of Pokemon cards, all from the same set. As a golden example of consistency, take a look at Vanoss Gaming's thumbnails. It's easy to recognize that these are his videos because regardless of the art style or the subject matter, they all share the iconic rainbow backdrop. The Odd Ones Out is a great example too, because his thumbnails feature his YouTube persona, one that's pretty hard to miss for that matter. But if you don't like the idea of drawing your thumbnails, that's okay too. There's plenty of other iconic thumbnail styles that don't even use art to get the viewer's attention. Like Markiplier's videos, that man's face is a great magnet for attention. And I think we can all agree that the same can be said for Mr. Beast, whose face and distinct clickbait-style thumbnails, despite not actually being clickbait in nature some of the time, have easily garnered worldwide attention. At the end of the day, there's no one right way to make a YouTube thumbnail, and it's gonna take you a few dozen tries to find the style that you're most comfortable with or that you enjoy the most. But once you do find your style, making these thumbnails for yourself is gonna be a whole lot more fun. Thumbnail tip number 3. Make sure it's obvious what's happening in the thumbnail or what the video is going to be about. In other words, make sure the carpet matches the drapes. But seriously, the last thing that I personally want to do is mislead my subscribers into clicking on something they think is about one thing but actually turns out to be about something else entirely. If there's a clear disconnect between the thumbnail art and the contents of the video, there's definitely gonna be a few unhappy campers. However, if there's a certain moment in the video that stands out from the rest, or something the video builds up to, it's totally fine to center the thumbnail around that, whether that's a recreation of the scene or something like a meme whose context parallels that scene as well. That way, the viewer can have something to look forward to, so you're effectively advertising both the video and sticking to the subject matter without deviating too far into clickbait territory. The end goal of the thumbnail is to create a focal point that will make the viewer say, "Hey, what's going on here? Guess I better watch the video to find out," thus successfully drawing in your audience. Thumbnail tip number 4. Fancy details don't always make the thumbnail. If you're someone like me who likes to put some serious TLC into every work of art they make, you'll be relieved to know that a good thumbnail requires nothing of the sort. You don't have to worry about drawing every little swirl, stitch, strand of hair, or freckle on someone in the thumbnail to attract a viewer's attention. More often than not, as long as you stick to the overall mood, scene, or action that you're going for, people are gonna be interested in what they can click on. But a lovely example of a YouTube thumbnail with minimal detail comes from Something Else YT. I mean, look at it! It's so smooth and simple! And that adorable face is a clickable feature without a doubt. But you'll notice that a lot of his thumbnails don't use very much if any shading, highlights, facial features, or wrinkles in the clothes. Flat colors and simple shapes work just as well as fully rendered art. Other great ways to draw emphasis include a white outline around the subject matter, zoomy focus lines, or even the classic drop shadow, assuming you remember to draw the primary focus on a separate layer from everything else, that is. One person who does an amazing job with that kind of art style? Jihi! Some of you might recognize that as the name of Cartoons' thumbnail artist. I mean, just look at him. The thumbnails are so gorgeous and often don't require any heavy detail emphasis or major rendering that take hours to do. Listen, I'm not discouraging you from putting lots of details into your thumbnails. If that's your style, then go for it! These are your thumbnails we're talking about, so do what you want to do. I don't mind. Tip number 5, there is no shame in using pre-made assets or screenshots. Just because you're drawing a YouTube thumbnail doesn't mean you have to draw every single part of the thumbnail. There's no shame in using a screenshot for the background or cutting out an item from the game and pasting it in such a way that it looks like someone's holding it. I mean, you've seen the early SpongeBob episodes from the early 2000s, right? I mean, the contrast between cartoon and hyperrealism can be funny as hell. I do the same thing sometimes. If I'm too spent from drawing the subject matter to make a nice background, I'll either come through the game trailers or raw gameplay to find an acceptable screenshot that I can use instead. Although sometimes that hyperrealism can be trippy or distracting, so that's why I use a filter to simplify the colors or even just blur the heck out of it. But if that doesn't work, I do the next best thing with next to no effort. I make my thumbnails in Clip Studio Paint, which has a massive online library of assets that I can use to make the art. If you need brushes, backgrounds, 3D models, or specific patterns, they've got them. Like, I've had to draw more than my share of Grand Theft Auto thumbnails, and we all know it's not GTA if you don't see a gun or a car in the shot. So I just yoink a model from the asset store and trace the lines over the edges to spare myself the headache. Look, I know these tactics seem like shortcuts, but you know what? That's totally fine. It's not like you're cutting and pasting a painting of a gun or a magical stat that somebody spent days drawing themselves, or, God forbid, used an AI to make the thumbnail for you. I mean, that's just lazy right there and might create a serious verbal beating in the comment section later. Like I said though, these are just some tips that I have to offer based on my own experience making YouTube thumbnails. You'll notice that most of what I've had to say thus far focused more on the drawing process rather than the logistics of making them for other people. If you want to take up making YouTube thumbnails as a source of income, you might want to listen to some advice that I have to share. All based on my experiences too, by the way. Professional thumbnail tip number 1. Get to know the person you're making these thumbnails for and how many they're asking of you. Some YouTubers upload full-time, some part-time, some are really nice, some are sketchier than others, and some might not always pay on time. And then of course there's the occasional jackass that'll just take the thumbnail art and ghost you without paying a dime, and well, that's more of a worst case scenario. Either way, the better you get to know the people you're working with, the easier it'll be to make a thumbnail cater to their taste and produce results that you're both satisfied with. Especially because there have been a few instances where I spent some good time making a banger thumbnail with fancy rendering and effects, only to find out it wasn't exactly what the client had in mind originally. So given how much time is left between completing the first thumbnail and when the video has to go live, it'll have to be swapped out with a screenshot from the game, which, if the channel doesn't normally do thumbnails like that, does not bode well for the people involved. So get to know what kinds of thumbnails they like to see, maybe take some notes, and keep them to the side so you can remind yourself anytime they give you an assignment. Also, it never hurts to ask questions if you don't know what to do for part of the thumbnail, because more often than not, if you don't understand something and just try to wing it, you might end up looking like kind of a dumbass. Trust me, I've been there before, I know what I'm talking about. Professional thumbnail tip number 2. If you're gonna be drawing thumbnails for somebody else, you have to be able to meet a deadline. Believe me when I say that I've learned this the hard way working for Wildcat and H2O Delirious. Usually the details for said thumbnail come in the day that it's due, for that matter. Naturally, I have like a specific time window that I have to complete the thumbnail in, which means that honestly, I don't have a lot of time to like slow down and meticulously think out what kind of thumbnail is gonna be. I don't have the time to make like 6 or 7 different drafts for said thumbnail, you know? Sometimes you're just gonna have to kind of jump into it or go with the first thought that pops into your head, because these guys are uploading videos that get hundreds of thousands of views, and for that matter, that have to go up day of. So you gotta be able to work fast, and you gotta be able to work smart. Not necessarily take shortcuts, but you gotta know what you can and can't do within a given time frame. Which brings me to tip number 3. If you're drawing a thumbnail on a time limit, do not focus on the tiny details or zoom in more than like 300%. Because honestly, 1, it takes too long, and 2, it's gonna be so tiny that it won't even be visible from far away, or as a good rule of thumb, if you can't see it on mobile view, it's probably not that important, honestly. So that's one of those things, because I've definitely made this mistake working on tiny details and even just like one character in the thumbnail's like costume or their weapon or something. It just takes too long. You focus on one part of the thumbnail for too long and it eats up the time you have to work on the rest of the thumbnail, you know? Don't waste too much time on tiny details that only you see and that you probably know that nobody else is gonna see. Tip number 4, and this kind of goes back to 2 and 3, clock your time. You gotta know how long it takes you to do a singular thumbnail, for 2 reasons for that matter. Number 1, you gotta be able to know that you can actually make the deadline that they're asking of you. And 2, you gotta know how much you're gonna charge for these thumbnails, because you gotta make sure that you're charging for the time and energy that you specifically put into making said thumbnail, as well as any corrections that the person might ask of you after it's already done. You know, because either there might be a certain thing wrong with the color correction, or I don't know, maybe you forgot the logo, you accidentally left the sketch layer visible, or you know, you forgot to give a bird its legs. Believe me, I've been through all of those. Tip number 5, if you're gonna be drawing the same YouTuber's thumbnails over and over again, it's not a bad idea to make a couple of reusable assets. Now let me explain. As somebody who's drawn over 400 different thumbnails for Delirious in the span of about a year and 3 months at this point, obviously I've had to draw the same guy in the same position in the exact same scenario, despite a couple of tweaks here and there. And here's the thing, if I'm drawing the same guy in the same position in the same scenario, why should I have to draw that from scratch when I've already drawn the exact same thing before? So you know what? If you're gonna be doing this thing long term and you don't want to waste any more time and energy than you already have drawing the exact same thing before, do me a favor, when you're drawing that thumbnail, make sure that you separate the main guy into his own little folder so you can just kind of set that aside for a later date. But this way, if a date comes later along where again you have to draw the same guy in the same position for the same scenario, you can just kind of go back to that previous thumbnail, pick him up out of it, and then place him in the new thumbnail. And you know, either change his expression a little bit, maybe flip him across the y-axis or change the lighting, because speaking from personal experience, it saves time, energy, and there's a good chance that nobody's gonna notice. I mean, I'm taking a look at my cutout folder right now, just for the sake of giving an example. I've got like a bunch of different background assets like explosions or, you know, gunfire or stuff like that. But in terms of characters and stuff, based on how many times I've had to draw the guys, I've got about 26 different Deliriouses, maybe 15 different Vanoses, 7 or 8 Terrorizers, 3 Wildcats, for some reason 15 Noglas, and 2 or 3 Marcels. And about what, 26 different Cartoonses? Like I said, I have a lot of backup assets if I need to save myself some time, or at least just make this job easier on myself. Again, work smarter, not harder. It'll pay off in the long term, and there's a chance that a little trick like this will help you also avoid burnout. Which brings me to this next one. Professional tip number 6, and this one is the most important above all. Take care of yourself. Obviously, you're not going to be excited to do every single thumbnail that you get as an assignment. And for that matter, there's going to be some that you just don't want to do flat out, but you're going to have to kind of power through it because they need it and you don't have much time. Again, speaking from experience, you got to find ways to make this job easier on yourself, or at least make it more manageable for your own benefit. Because if you're not enjoying the process or it's not making you happy, then what's the point? First off, there is no shame in asking for some time off or a day off. I mean, obviously, like, Wildcat's come to me more times than I can count where he's asked, like, if I'm available for a thumbnail that day, and obviously I've said no, I'm sorry, I can't, for God knows how many different reasons right now. I mean, it was either between, like, my dad's taking me out to lunch and I'm not gonna make it home in time, or I threw out my hands opening a can of gelato, which, by the way, Talenti Gelato, that's actually a thing, look it up. Or in some cases, I just really needed a break or some personal fun time, and it was a case of, nah, dude, it's Cinco de Mayo, I'm gonna get fucking plastered. And the response I got was, hey, have fun. So again, no shame in saying that you need time off. I've even said this to the editors in Delirious before. You know, granted, obviously they needed thumbnails that day, so if I was gonna take like 4 or 5 days off at a time, we came up with a plan where I could pre-arrange the thumbnails beforehand, so when the day came where I'd be away from the office, they would have everything they needed to get the video uploaded and have a nice thumbnail ready to go as well. Planning ahead or just doing things to better take care of yourself will definitely help you enjoy this job more. Even if it's the simpler things, like just making sure that you get a full night's sleep. I know that like those 8 or 9 hours of sleep really don't seem all that important, but trust me, when you get those 8 or 9 hours, you're gonna feel so much better afterwards. Not to mention, you know, just eating stuff and drinking the right stuff, or just having something that'll keep you awake and energized while you're doing your job. For me personally, I do need some caffeine to get going because, I mean, let's face it, my body might as well just be a bottle of Coke Zero. Seriously though, while you're working, make sure that you at least eat like a full lunch or something beforehand, or just have something to snack on in the meantime. Me, for example, my little snack could be anything from Reese's Pieces to Lifesaver Mints to a bowl of fruits, as well as a bottle of like Gatorade, Powerade, Coke Zero, Glitch energy drink would be a good one for that matter. My point is, as long as you just take care of yourself and make sure that you have what you need to do the job and get it done, you will feel so much better about the product that you're putting out there. Alright, well, now that my basic professional tips for making thumbnails are out of the way, why don't we take a look at the kinds of people that you might end up working for if you decide to do thumbnails full time. So one of the most important things about doing thumbnails either part-time or full-time for other people is that communication is the most important thing about this job. You gotta know what exactly it is they want and, well, whether or not you can actually produce that to their requests. It really depends from YouTuber to YouTuber what kind of communication you're gonna have. Either you talk to them themselves about what kind of thumbnail they want for their video, or if they're off busy doing other stuff because, you know, they're just that popular, sometimes you end up talking to their editor, you know, the guy who makes the videos that you're making the thumbnail for. However, I did a little bit of research, and before me I have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 shining examples of different thumbnail requests from different YouTubers. So for the sake of organization and, you know, comedy, I'm gonna start with the simplest one and then work my way up to the most complicated and or craziest one that I have here. So the first one up to bat is actually one that I get on the daily. These are the thumbnail requests that I get from Editor Lirius, aka the guy who makes the videos for H2O Delirious. Editor Lirius also goes by Lord Thievel, shout out to that guy. But yeah, usually we do the communication to make the thumbnails for these videos. Usually he sends me the reference footage for the video or even the video itself that's unlisted before it goes live. That way I can just look over the footage for myself, pick out one of the best moments from it, and then make that into the thumbnail. Basically, I call the shots on what kind of thumbnail it's gonna be, unless they have some ideas that they want me to try out. This request in particular is from one of the Gmod Game of Thrones videos that I did recently. Apparently, there was a couple of nice scenes like Vanoss shooting Delirious as this dragon hoochie saying, "Equality, bitch!" It's a nice feeling to have that much freedom, maybe a little too much power, but you know what? I enjoyed either way. The next example I have before me is possibly the most gloriously organized thumbnail request that I've ever seen in my life. The next example is apparently what it's like to get a thumbnail request from Nogla. And the only reason that I know what this looks like is because my friend Chias is the thumbnail artist for the bonus channel Nogla Plus. Now, a couple of things here. Apparently Chias communicates with the editor, who happens to be Nogla's brother, who had a very clear and concise vision in mind for the thumbnail itself. He gave reference photos, he specified what he wanted to see particularly, he gave an idea as to what he wanted for the background, he also told him what kind of format he wanted, which is just torso up as opposed to a whole panorama thing. He also referenced things that Chias had done before with the clarity and the zooming in parts, but the most important part is that he gave a clear deadline for Chias to meet. Very smart, very clean. I kinda love this one the most, honestly. I mean, it just gives an idea as to what you expect from the final product, and Chias definitely delivers. Good on you, man. The third example, what I prefer to call the golden child out of all 4 thumbnail assignments I have here today, comes from a new guy that I worked with recently known as Fat Meme God. Yeah, the guy reached out to me after he saw this Texas Chainsaw Massacre thumbnail that I posted on Twitter and wanted to collaborate with me on making some nice thumbnail art for his new video. And boy, let me tell you, I did not expect this level of professionalism going into this one. Not only did he give me some great reference material to work with, but when it came back with the first draft, he responded with a 2-page PDF document outlining all the changes he wanted me to make. I came in with a sketchbook doodle and this dude came back with a college essay. It was amazing. Despite how intimidating this may seem at first, this was actually super helpful in my case. It's the difference between being handed a 1,000-piece puzzle and being told to just go at it, as opposed to being handed a dismantled ship in a bottle with a book of instructions on how to reassemble it piece by piece. We thumbnail artists here stand a client who tells us just what they want in excruciating detail. Unfortunately though, this commission experience is one of those times that reinforces a bitter truth. Even if you're an expert in your field, you can't please every client you get. And it also reinforced the fact that I can't recreate those Meat Canyon vibes to save my life. It's alright though. I still got paid for all the drafts that I churned out, and in the end, Fat Meme God and I parted on good terms. But if he ever comes back, then yeah, I'll give it another shot. Overall though, 10 out of 10 clients would thumbnail again. And now for my last and personally most favorite thumbnail assignment example for a completely different reason than organization, the thumbnail request that I get from Mr. Wildcat himself. Now here's the thing, I've only been doing thumbnails for Wildcat on and off since about November 2021 because I'm not the main thumbnail artist. I basically just serve as one of 6 or 7 different backups in case she can't make it that day. But I've gotten a number of different requests from Wildcat over those months. Some of them are very short and concise and come with the reference footage in mind. Some of them are just, I need you to draw me and Nogla doing sweet tricks on a BMX bike and alien costumes. Or, and this one is my favorite example of all time honestly, it will be a paragraph long description, no periods, no commas whatsoever. In fact, you know what, just explaining it won't be enough. Let me just read this one to you. So I need another one for Rainbow Six Extraction. This time I need me showing Vanos where the toilet is in this creepy gross world with all the alien things, and sitting on the toilet is an overweight greasy Italian man with the same wife beater on, and he looks very confused as I proudly show Vanos where the toilet is. The old, that's the toilet joke from years ago, lol. And of course I can usually get the idea that he has in mind, but just to make sure that I completely understand what he means, I usually ask a follow-up question. This one being in this case, what's a wife beater? And then, well, we're just not going to talk about the nightmare I had that night where the entire Vanos crew was laughing at me. I still haven't totally lived that one down, but you know what, it is pretty damn funny to revisit. Speaking of funny to revisit, did you guys know that about a year and a half ago, Wildcat asked me for a Fortnite thumbnail, and to this day, I still don't think he noticed that I snuck my friends into the thumbnail as well. Oh man. You should have seen the day that we saw the video get onto trending for gaming, and then my friends just went, "Look! We're secretly famous!" That one's going in my history book. As is the other time that I decided to fuck around and they still haven't found out. On one of Delirious's Among Us videos from 2022, you can kind of see that on this crazy man's conspiracy theory board, I may or may not have included a list of me and my friends' names up there. If you're wondering who the culprit was, it was me. It was MaximumPanic the whole time. On that note, would you guys like to see one of the first thumbnails I ever did for Delirious where I learned the hard way I didn't have to put so much sweat, tears, and arthritis into my work? Well, take a look at this one. Back in March of 2022, editor Delirious passed along a message from Boss Delirious himself, which asked him to ask me if I could make a banger thumbnail for a sponsored Apex Legends video. Now, I could have easily done this in 2 to 3 hours on a Monday afternoon. However, this one had a particular request to include as many members of the Vanos crew as possible. Least to say, as soon as I saw that message, challenge accepted, motherfuckers! But because I want to be able to use my good hand after I finish this thing, I did the smart thing and started with the line art the night before it was actually due. It took me about 4 hours to sketch out where all the guys were going to be positioned, how many details would be visible on their outfits, which thank God were all of the same character, and most importantly, how to make Delirious the centerpiece without blending into the background with the rest of the guys. Through much trial and error, I finally figured it out and went to work inking the thumbnail. The next morning, I went back to work and started by taking a look at the reference for the spiky dodgeball of doom that I needed for the thumbnail. Only to realize it wasn't a ball at all. Turns out the thing is a cluster of goddamn hexagons! Now, because I embrace the philosophy of work smarter, not harder, I took a screenshot of the ball itself and traced over the edges to save myself the pain and suffering of studying and recreating it onto a blank canvas. 1, to save myself the stress, and 2, because I was kind of working on a deadline. After I did that, applied the base colors, and then copy-pasted it a few times over, it was finally time to get to coloring. My favorite part, by the way. Now, I have a specific color palette set aside that I use for shading and highlights, but considering how many guys I added to the thumbnail, which was all of them, by the way, I had to take the easier route and do the shading on a multiply layer. This is one of those cases where I really had to think about the color that I was using to shade, because while normally you'd want to match the temperature of a background like this with the light shade of blue, give or take anyways, the poses and the situation themselves were very, high octane, or I guess high energy for lack of a better word. So I had to opt for a warmer color, like a dark pink or violet, which actually worked out pretty nicely. Anyways, after figuring out the direction of the light source, adding some rim lighting for extra pizzazz, and making the hair all shiny, I was finally at the finish line. Now, when I started out, I did the smart thing and put Vanos and Delirious in a separate folder from the rest of the guys. This way, I could apply this thick black and white outline around the 2 of them to make them stick out from the rest of the crew, since, I mean, this is Delirious's video after all. And just to make sure the others were distinguishable from those 2, I added a faint yellow light in the center and a dark blue vignette around the edges. This way, the first thing your eye gets drawn to is Delirious himself. And, you know, Vanos too, cause, I mean, I guess he's pretty neat. So for the sake of improvement and just pointing out my own horrid mistakes from way back when, why don't we try to redraw some of my old thumbnails? I sifted through a long list of the ones that I made back in 2019 and singled out the ones that made me cringe the most. At the end, I narrowed it down to 2 choices. I'm gonna re-examine my thumbnails for the first episode of The Last of Us and Telltale's The Walking Dead, and then make better versions of them. Alright, so let's start with this Walking Dead thumbnail, and oh god, do I have my work cut out for me. So funny thing, I vividly remember working on this way back when. I mean, it was my very first, Let's Play thumbnail that I ever did, and I wanted to try and, make a good first impression with it, which maybe back then I did for, a itty-bitty little channel like myself, but today, it definitely needs a bit of a makeover. So I guess for the Walking Dead thumbnails, what I was trying to do way back then was have the title and the episode on one side of the screen, but on the other it would be a scene reflecting that episode. Honestly, I'm not even sure why. This must have been back in the time where I didn't realize that I could use screenshots for backgrounds and stuff. Either way, what I was trying to go for was a scene in Clementine's house where, Lee has to put down the turned babysitter and stuff. Initially, it kind of looks like that, but at the same time, it could really use some improvements. So, first off, perspective is kind of all over the place. It's kind of hard to discern exactly what was going on with the counter and the book on the left over there compared to the treehouse and the... Wait, hang on, is that the backyard fence or... Either way, you can definitely tell that there's a lot of problems with this image, so we're gonna fix that first off, and maybe try not to draw as much of the background scene as possible because, the characters are kind of the focus here. Second thing definitely is, I didn't really know how to draw children that well back then. Baseball caps have always been a struggle, I don't know why. Something about the way that the bill connects to the actual cap or just how it all sits on the head is kind of confusing to me. Plus, me in this image and the lighting here, from a faraway glance, the hammer kind of blends into the rest of the shirt. Not to mention, my head is apparently half as big as my torso, which I'm not quite a fan of, honestly. Lighting was apparently a big struggle for me back then because, my hair is blue here, whereas, in a dim, warm lighting like that, it should probably be more of, a beige or, a soft yellow/orange. You get what I'm going for here, right? A lot of things in here need fixing, so let's get down to that part. So I've had a little bit of time to mull over what I'm gonna do for the thumbnail makeover, and I think what I want to do is change scenes entirely, actually. I also took a look at the cover art for the game as well, and honestly, this iconic pose of Lee and Clementine together, it definitely got my creative motor churning again. So you know what? I think I'm gonna replicate this pose, but in the background, it's gonna be a combination of zombies and then maybe a shot of the drugstore where, this whole big story kind of kicked off and stuff. Admittedly, as much as I like immersing myself in the position of the main character and stuff, and as cool as Lee's outfit is here, I think I am gonna customize it just a little bit to kind of fit my aesthetic a little better. I mean, aesthetic, air quotes. I mean, normally, my generic aesthetic is cyberpunk borderline, but for a zombie apocalypse that happened in what was it, 2004 in the comics, I think maybe something a little more modern slash grungy would do me a better job. I'll keep the shirt and the pants, but I think over that I'm gonna put a maybe some kind of denim jacket or something. Not quite like Clementine's in the final season, but something pretty close to it. There's definitely ways to personalize this that I didn't take the opportunity to do last time, and I kind of regret that. I am definitely still gonna be holding that axe because that was actually a lot of fun. Frankly, just the idea of me holding any kind of weapon is tantalizing, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe a few extra marks here and there because I want to kind of give this the comic book aesthetic. And here's the final result. Okay, you see now compared to the last one, this actually looks like a Walking Dead thumbnail here, and I could not be happier with the results. Okay, so I'm looking back at this old Last of Us thumbnail that I did, and honestly, for a beginner's work, it really wasn't that bad, but at the same time, there's some glaring problems with this one. I mean, for one, my character didn't fill up the page nearly as much as they could have, and on a related note, proportions are just all over the place. I mean, again, we have the issue with my head being half as big as my torso. Again, still not a fan of the bobblehead look to this day. I mean, the backpack detail was fine. It's just that for a zombie apocalypse, I don't look as grimy or dirty as I could. It kind of looks like I just got my hair and makeup done, right? If I had to describe this thumbnail as any 2 words, then I think I'd have to say washed out. I mean, seriously, when you look at me compared to the background, which was supposed to be a redraw of the game's cover art, honestly, the background is missing a whole lot of details. I mean, the water itself was fine, but I mean, the grass and the buildings, again, they all look kind of washed out, or there's just not a lot of detail to kind of convey how, overgrown this whole place is, It's just not great, honestly, so, you know what? We're gonna redraw this sucker. And to do that, I'm actually gonna reference The Last of Us' cover art this time. But you know what? Just to flip the script a little bit, because, this is still my video, I'm gonna draw myself on the right side here, and then Ellie's gonna be looking over her shoulder in the background this time. As much as I love the classic Joel look here with the green button-down shirt, the jeans, and the backpack, I do want to kind of adjust it just a little bit, honestly. So again, keep the shirt and the jeans, but I think we're gonna add a gun holster on the leg because again, you're kind of carrying more guns than you know what to do with in the game, right? As for my own little personal touches, I'm gonna add some bandages on my right arm. On my left arm, we're gonna keep that watch. Something I always wanted to do in the Last of Us universe, if I ever had the chance, was to get like sunflower tattoos down my left arm. Because fun fact, the sunflower is actually the representative flower for people of neurodivergence or people with autism like myself. Plus, sunflowers are just so pretty and they fit the aesthetic of The Last of Us very nicely. But yeah, as you can kind of see here with my hairstyle as well, I'm kind of replicating Ellie from The Last of Us Part 2 in this because I am a woman and I was gonna stylize myself to fit this aesthetic kind of, and I was not gonna give myself the Joel haircut to be able to do that, you know? Yeah, but I think between the tattoo, the roll-up sleeves, we had a little bit of grime and dirt to both me and Ellie because, again, we're kind of going through waters, shooting zombies, getting blood all over us and stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna add the backpack, I'm gonna add the gun right there, I'm going to give myself a spiked baseball bat over my shoulder because, again, iconic melee weapon for the game, right? At this point, I don't really trust myself to do a cityscape background, or at least draw one for that matter, so this time, I think I'm just gonna get a screenshot from the game. Boston or Pittsburgh, it really doesn't matter. I mean, they both look the same at this point in time anyways, so, so we got all those details in. We're gonna add a nice little film grain filter over the top just to give it that nice little crusty old movie kind of look. And with that, here is the final result. Again, much better than the last iteration of this thumbnail I did, and you know what? It actually looks like we're trying to survive out here and not like I just got my hair and makeup done. So that's a win in my book. Alright, and with that, I think I've offered as much advice as I can give on the art of doing thumbnails without sounding too out of place. If you do take my advice, thank you! But also see what others have to say. After all, I'm still learning new things to this day, so maybe we can learn together along the way. But anyways, if you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like and sharing it with your friends. Also, to any YouTubers out there who currently employ one or even multiple thumbnail artists, would it be kind of a tall request for you to take one of your 365 days out of the year to show some appreciation for the guys who made your channel possible to this day? I'm sure that they would really appreciate that kind of recognition, especially for all the hard work they've already put into your channels. And that goes double for the guys who've worked with you for more than 3 to 5 years at this point. Either way, I hope you guys have a good day out there. Be sure to like and subscribe, and treat your thumbnail artists well, or we're gonna have a nice long talk about compensating their time and energy. No worries, we take cash, credit, painkillers, or your hands.